Welcome back to the Thermo podcast. I'm your host, Jayton Miller, and today I have on the podcast with me Miss Tiffany Williams. So, Tiffany Williams is a functional nutritional therapy practitioner, and she actually coaches women with fertility awareness. So, in this episode, we talk about natural birth control methods, and she actually taught me a lot that I hadn't looked into myself, and I'm really excited for y'all to be able to dive into today. So, without further ado, this is Tiffany Williams. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the Thermo podcast. I'm your host, Jayton Miller, and today I have Tiffany Williams on the podcast with me. How are you doing today, Tiffany?
I'm doing well. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing very well. So for those of you who don't know Tiffany, she is currently doing her own coaching program for women who, now, is it just fertility awareness or is it kind of like a breadth of things?
It's a bunch of things. So if you have, period pain, if you have PCOS, endometriosis, I'm a functional nutritional therapy practitioner as well through the NTA, and I'm currently working towards my fertility awareness educator certification. And I'm kind of like blending those two things together because they do really like marry each other. Nutrition and fertility really go hand in hand. So putting those two together to help women heal their cycle issues.
That's awesome. So do you kind of mind telling listeners how you kind of came into this sphere?
Yeah, sure. So I started dating my boyfriend about 3 years ago, and I decided that we did need like some sort of birth control. So I went to my gynecologist and I decided to go with an IUD because I have tried many different types of birth controls through the year. I've been on like the pill, like several different types of pill. I've been on the ring, and I decided an IUD might be better for some reason. So I got the IUD inserted, and a couple months later, I found out that it was dislodged. So I had to get it removed. And so I had decided before I got it removed that I really wanted to look into like natural birth control. I went to Google and I was like, is there such a thing? So, and then I found out about fertility awareness method, particularly the book called Taking Charge of Your Fertility. And so I immediately jumped on that. I brought that with me to my appointment when I was going to get my IUD removed. And my doctor removed the IUD and he was like, all right, so we should put another one in. I was like, no, I think I'm actually going to try this thing called the fertility awareness method. And I showed him my book and he was like, okay, well, I'll see you back here in 3 months when you're pregnant. And I was just like, I can't believe that he was just so like passive and not like helpful at all. And I did feel really discouraged by that, but I decided to keep going and keep learning about it. And unfortunately, I feel like fertility awareness is like so niche that I didn't have any friends that were doing it. And so like that, I feel like also kind of deters you when you don't know anyone else who knows about it. And everyone's like, oh, you're just going to like track your temperatures. Like, is that really going to help you avoid pregnancy? But it does. And so I've been doing that for around 3 years now. No pregnancy scares, none at all. And I finally decided that I was going to become a fertility awareness educator. So I am going through FEM, which stands for Fertility Education and Medical Management, their program, which is a little different from what Taking Charge of Your Fertility teaches, because it teaches you want to track like your BBT, your cervical mucus, and your cervix height. But FEM teaches cervical mucus and LH testing. So it's a little bit different. There are many different forms of fertility awareness-based methods, but it's important to know that they are all like really effective. It just takes some work to learn and understand how to track your biomarkers, which would be that BBT or basal body temperature, cervical mucus, which across the board, I'm pretty much every fertility awareness based method is going to track cervical mucus. It's one of the most important biomarkers. And then things like LH, cervical height, progesterone strips, etc. It really depends on the method, but across the board, everyone's tracking their cervical mucus.
Okay. So generally speaking, what is fertility awareness?
Okay, so it's the tracking of the biomarkers, and those biomarkers tell you where you're at in your cycle. So at the beginning of our cycle, FSH from our pituitary, there's like a feedback loop that happens. So FSH communicates with our ovaries. I'm like forgetting words. Communicates with our ovaries, and it stimulates a follicle to start maturing. And as this follicle starts maturing, it produces increasing amounts of estrogen. And increasing amounts of estrogen, you'll start to see cervical mucus. And the cervical mucus, it'll be there's two different types taught in the method that I teach, something called EL mucus, which could be described as like a moist type mucus where that stretches less than half an inch, and ES mucus, which would be described as like egg white mucus that stretches way more than an inch. It's very slippery, it's very lubricative, very stretchy. And the ES mucus is the mucus where ovulation is about to occur. And so when we have that increasing amount of estrogen, that feeds back to our pituitary, and the pituitary releases LH, or luteinizing hormone. And it's the luteinizing hormone that makes ovulation happen and the corpus luteum to form. And so we really want the corpus luteum to form because that's where we make progesterone for the rest of our cycle. And so progesterone, when it dominates in that luteal phase, or the phase that's right after ovulation, you're going to have very little to no mucus, because progesterone actually produces a very thick, dense mucus, and it's almost like a plug that happens in the cervix. And that mucus is antimicrobial, it's thick, so there isn't any, like, sperm can't make it through, and even if it did, there's no egg to fertilize at that point, because after an egg ovulates, it's only alive for around like 24 hours.
Interesting. So how long does that last phase usually last?
So a healthy luteal phase will be anywhere from 9 to 18 days. And it's funny because it just depends on the method, because if you are taking charge of your fertility, and based on like BBT rules, an 18-day luteal phase, if it's characterized by like 18 high temperatures, that could indicate pregnancy if you have those 18 consistent high temperatures. However, if you are not taking charge of your fertility rules, an 18-day luteal phase is okay. But if you're having longer than that, that might be cause for concern. If you're having shorter than 9 days, that is considered a short luteal phase, and that could signal that there's a progesterone insufficiency happening, or ovulation maybe didn't occur, or there's something called a luteinized unruptured follicle. I don't feel like many people talk about this, but that's where the egg is kind of stuck in between ovulating and not ovulating. So a little bit of progesterone will be produced, but it'll be like a low grade amount, and it won't be enough to support a healthy luteal phase. So between 9 and 18 days is a healthy length for a luteal phase.
Okay. So what are the fertility rules that you mentioned?
Yeah. So for BBT, you'd want to take your temperature, or basal body thermometer, basal body temperature, in the morning. This is your waking temperature. This is before like you get out of bed to use the bathroom, before you take a drink of water. You want to take your temperature every morning. In your follicular phase, which is that first half of your cycle, which would be menstruation up until ovulation, your temperature is going to be on the lower side. So it generally should be in like the high 97 range. I've heard people say 96. I've heard people say like 97.6 or 97.8, in that range is okay. But then like in your luteal phase, you should be in the 98 range. Up around 98.6 is where you should be in the morning. But if you, in your follicular phase, you're in the 96 range, and then in your follicular phase, you're in the 97 range, there could be something else going on, like low thyroid issues or low metabolism happening. But then as far as the other rules that could be happening with like cervical mucus, you have to track it every day. Also, you always record the most estrogenic sign of the day. So if, like I was describing, EL mucus just being like moist, or ES mucus being like super stretchy and lubricative, if you have EL mucus in the morning and you have ES mucus at night, you're going to record ES mucus. You're going to record the most estrogenic sign. And so once you start seeing that moist or that egg white type mucus, you are in your ovulatory phase. And so until you're out of that ovulatory phase, if you're avoiding pregnancy, you should be either avoiding sex or relying on another contraceptive method, like a barrier method. And then after, there's also something called like a peak day. And that would be the last day you see egg white cervical mucus. And so this is something that's brought up, and I'm pretty sure, I want to say all, but I don't know every fertility awareness based method. I just know like a couple, and the one that I practice in particular. But so for peak day, you always have to do a count of 3 days of possible fertility after that last day of estrogenic mucus, because ovulation can happen, and it can happen either 3 days before that peak day or 3 days after. So you might see like, it might be like dryness for 3 days after that peak day, but ovulation could occur in those 3 days. And then there's also LH. So sorry, I'm like talking a lot, but it's just like all of these biomarkers have to be used together, because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. I think there's a lot of people that do like natural cycles and just do their BBT, but it really doesn't account for like, if you're seeing estrogenic cervical mucus, but your thermometer is telling you that it's okay to have intercourse and you're avoiding pregnancy, there's a chance that you could get pregnant. So it's important to like, if you're doing BBT, also tracking your cervical mucus. And then on top of that, there's something called LH, which is luteinizing hormone, and testing that during your ovulatory phase to see if you get a positive, because then that's letting you know that there's an LH surge about to happen, which means that you may be ovulating in the next 24 to 48 hours. And so there are lots of women that like to rely on LH testing. I don't think LH testing alone is reliable by itself, and it also doesn't tell you if you've ovulated, and it's not a guarantee that you will ovulate. So yeah, you just have to use them all together. You can't just do one. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. That's a lot of information. It's kind of interesting. So why do you think that this is more advantageous than something such as regular contraception, like the pill or something like that?
Because it increases bodily autonomy. When I was telling you that I like went to my doctor and told him that I wanted to do fertility awareness, it's just like it gets brushed off, but like it's a chance for you to learn about like how hormones are affecting you and what your hormones are doing throughout your cycle. And that's not something that your gynecologist is going to teach you about. And I'm not going to say it's for whatever reason. I honestly don't think that doctors have enough time to like sit you down and talk about that stuff, because they're trained in medical school that they only have about 10 minutes with patients. So it's like, I don't think that we can really expect our doctors to educate us like that, and we need to do it ourselves, honestly. And fertility awareness is also like the perfect like off the grid birth control. I always like to say, because it can be as expensive or as cheap as you want it. Like cervical mucus, it's going to happen. It's your body. It's for free. It's happening. It's going to tell you if you're fertile or not. And then if you want to do like added LH strips or a BBT thermometer, BBT thermometers aren't that expensive. Like mine was, I want to say like $3 from a Rite Aid, but like you can find them for cheap on Amazon. If you shop at Amazon, you can find them for like $15. It's really cheap. But then LH strips can be a little pricey, but it's really up to you. Like it's not something where you have to spend like $30 every month on a patch or a pill or whatever. And it's not something where you have to make an appointment with your doctor to get like an IUD removed or get a shot or a patch removed. So, and it doesn't take that long either, because I think a lot of people think that, oh, I have to take my temperature every morning. That's so annoying. But like, if you take a pill every morning, like how different is that?
Mhm.
It's not that hard. It might take like 1 minute longer, because then you need to chart it. Like either you put it in an app or you put it on your paper chart. But I think that women need to know how their bodies work, and fertility awareness is a great way for women to start learning about their bodies.
Definitely. Um, you had mentioned earlier progesterone and the role that that plays. Can you kind of go into the difference between like progesterone and progestins and how they play a role in this as well?
Yeah, so progesterone is actually it's really wonderful. So progesterone maintains the uterine lining. It's a hormone of relaxation. It helps normalize blood sugar levels. It's natural diuretic, and of course, like I was saying before, it thickens cervical mucus, which that's how it prevents. That's one of the many ways it could prevent pregnancy. But then when we're talking about progestins, um, they were originally made by like biochemists, because progesterone, there was the issue that progesterone can't be given orally. Um, and so, yeah, so they were, invented because it can't be given orally, but then progestins can. But unfortunately, progestins have properties of estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. So you're not just getting progesterone, you're getting those other effects that testosterone and estrogen would also give you.
So it works on those receptors?
Um, it's interesting that you say that, because progestins actually don't they don't bind to like those receptors. They can't bind to progesterone receptors. So it's weird that it's promoted as something that would relieve cycle issues like PMS, when it literally can't bind to a progesterone receptor. So it's just like, looking at the research on that, I'm just so curious why it was like presented as this kind of like cure-all for female hormone issues. As far as like testosterone, um, I'm not sure if it links to testosterone and estrogen receptors. I'd have to do a little bit more research on that, but for sure it doesn't for progesterone.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, so progestin can raise blood pressure, while progesterone doesn't. Like I was saying before, it lowers it. And progestins do not have the ability to convert into other steroid hormones, where progesterone can be used as a precursor to those other steroid hormones. So progestins overall, they don't have the same effects that progesterone has. Like if you can't even link to the progesterone receptor, how would it,
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Interesting. So what are the risks that are usually associated with using something like that's progestin rich, like a hormonal contraception, I guess?
Yeah. So I pretty much a lot of the complaints that you hear from people who take hormonal contraceptives. So like the high blood pressure, the high risk of like blood clots, moodiness. Um, Sometimes women will even get, like, if you didn't have PMS symptoms before and then you go on the pill, you'll start to get PMS symptoms. So it's just like the complete opposite of what you would want from actual progesterone. And so and while I don't necessarily encourage um progesterone or hormonal replacement therapy unless it's like necessary, um I don't know where I was going with that, but like progestin, like if you were to do it, doing a progestin is not the way to go. Like a natural progesterone is where you want to go. And there are plenty of women who have like PCOS or extremely heavy periods, and their doctors will be like, "Oh, take progesterone." And while they're being told it's progesterone, it's actually progestin that that they're given, and they're usually not told to only do it in the second half of their cycle, which is where you would want progesterone to be. They're told to take it the whole time. And so they're getting like these crazy symptoms while they're trying to solve, their PCOS or their heavy bleeding or their PMS, and they don't understand why it's not working. And then like they're just being blamed for not, trying hard enough on their diet or whatever. So natural progesterone is the way to go if you do decide to do hormonal replacement therapy, but it's really, really important that you keep your blood sugar balanced, because if your blood sugar dips too low, progesterone can't, like adrenaline keeps progesterone from being able to attach to a progesterone receptor. And even if it does attach, it can't like reach the nucleus of the cell like it's supposed to. And so it's really important that you get that blood sugar balance and your stress in order before you even attempt doing any type of hormone replacement therapy.
Definitely. Yeah. The more that I learn about the human body, the more that blood sugar stabilization and regulating blood sugar throughout the day becomes more and more prevalent and more important. So it's kind of fascinating that it's important even for fertility awareness too. What are some of the benefits that you've kind of experienced from doing this method?
Well, I no longer get like crazy, horrible moods. I feel like when I was on the IUD or the pill, like I had a lot of like mood issues. I went on Yaz was the first pill that I ever tried, which I don't know if you've heard of Yaz. I feel like many people have, but I think it was taken off the market at some point because there were so many horrible side effects that were happening. I thought I was going crazy when I was on that pill. It was so bad. But I no longer have to take a pill every day. I don't have to check like my IUD string. I don't have to wonder if my IUD is going to dislodge. And this is just a side note. When around the time that my IUD dislodged, two of my other friends who got IUDs, the same thing happened to them. And so what are the chances that something like that would happen, But yeah, it's, hormone free. And my periods have been way better than they have been in the past. And I just think that's so wonderful because I know my body way more than what I did before. So yeah, if you're experiencing symptoms with hormonal birth control, fertility awareness is a great option if you want a natural birth control, because I think a lot of people are told that they could do like a copper IUD and it'll be fine, but like copper IUDs are full of bio-unavailable copper, which can bring other minerals out of balance. And copper IUDs are also known to cause very heavy, painful periods. And do you really want that? Like, if you've never had painful periods, if your periods have always been like a regular flow, why would you opt into something that would give you just excruciating periods? It's just, so why not go for something where there's no hormones involved? And well, aside from the ones that are already happening in your body, and you don't have to have a foreign object in your uterus, So that's why I love fertility awareness.
Definitely. I think those are all very valid reasons. Where do you have any other kind of resources or information that people can utilize if they want to learn more about this?
Yeah, definitely Taking Charge of Your Fertility by Toni Weschler, I believe her name is. And I think, that's a wonderful place to start. But if you start reading it and you're like, I don't feel comfortable yet, I'm kind of confused with what I'm seeing, because cervical mucus tends to be kind of a stopping point for a lot of people because they're not sure if the mucus that they're seeing is like the egg white mucus or if it's just like the building up of estrogen or whatever. Work with a practitioner. It honestly doesn't cost too much. Most practitioners have fairly low prices as far as fertility awareness is concerned, because it's something that they really want to teach to women. And I'm also, I'm also a fertility awareness educator if anyone's interested. But yeah, that's pretty much the best place to start. That's the book that everyone starts with.
Sounds good. And then also follow you on Instagram as well, correct?
Oh yeah, at Sage Flow Holistic, Tiffany Williams FNTP, and then sageflowholistic.com is my website.
Heck yeah. Well, for all those you listening, make sure to give her a follow. Check out her website. Tiffany, I really appreciate your time on here today. Thank you for the abundance of information. And I look forward to having you on again sometime.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on here. It was wonderful.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you haven't already, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment down below if you want us to cover a different topic.